I'm Jimmy Lynn Ramseur, and this is Mary Walker that we're going to be interviewing today. It's April the 8th of 2025. Mary, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's start with, some basics. Let's start with your background. So where were you born? And tell us a little bit about your childhood and your parents.
Well, I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Hugh and Margaret Walker, who also grew up in Knoxville. We lived in North Knoxville, in a small area. Thing that stands out for me is my dad, who was very handy, built a sporting field next to our house. It was on a vacant lot. It wasn't anything fancy, but he laid out a baseball field and football and a basketball goal. And so all the neighbors came. Unfortunately, all the neighbors were boys. So I grew up a little bit of a tomboy, playing all sports and loved that. My mom and dad, my mom was a librarian and my dad was an electrician for Southern Railroad. And
Let's talk about sports a little bit because I know that you played softball. Have played softball all your life, really.
It was pre-Title IX, so there were no girls programs in high school or college other than intramurals, which I played. But played softball starting about age 8, I think, and was a shortstop and loved playing. And then when I was older, got involved with some adult teams and played until I was 70 in the Senior Olympics. So
that's pretty amazing.
Had a lot of fun. And played here with Metro Public Defender's Office and Juvenile Court, and so played also with a lot of lawyers. We played mixed leagues softball.
And just so you continued to play with the boys.
Yes, I did. There were a few girls.
Right. Good for you. I was one of those girls for a while, but I was so bad at it that I dropped out. It's good that you kept it going. So your father built this sports field or sports fields out next to you. What other things do you recall about your parents? Anything special note?
Well, they both were very loving. It was a different generation. Parents weren't as involved with you didn't have play groups. We were let out in the morning and came home at night. And mom and dad both worked, so we were involved with a lot of the neighbors, sort of shared parental responsibility, I guess.
It really was a village that helped really our whole generation grow up.
I think that's right. Mom and dad were both athletic. They met on the tennis court and married a little later for that generation, 25 and 27, and they married. And I have a brother, Hugh, who is 2 years older than I am. And so he let me tag along. So my childhood was really happy. I would chase after him and my mom would make him wait on me. And so we grew up close. He took up for me when I went to high school. He made sure it was an easy transition. His name is Hugh, and I always called him Huey. And when we went to high school, I made the mistake in the hall of saying, Huey. And he took me up against a locker and he said, don't you ever call me Huey again. So anyway, we had a great relationship. And my mom and dad were strict, expected a lot of us. We had a big garden, and Hugh and I, helped with the garden, shelled the beans, helped my mom can and freeze. And as I look back on it, it seems ideal. I'm sure it was not, but they were they grew up in the Depression, so they didn't go to college. They graduated high school in the middle of the Depression. And so, but they both took courses. My mom took a lot of courses at UT, didn't get enough to graduate, but was a librarian nevertheless, and loved that work. And my dad could do anything. I mean, he could build anything. He was an electrician. He built our house. So very self-sufficient, very involved in the Methodist Church, both my mom and dad. We were there all the time growing up.
As they say, you were there every time the doors were open.
Right. And MYF was important to me, Methodist Youth Fellowship.
Right.
So we did just, high school was great. It was the largest county high school, Central High School. And we had a lot of opportunities to be leaders there. I went to
Yeah.
Girls State, did some things that were, I think, helped shape what I ended up doing.
Right, right. So it sounds like you had a lot of parental support and that you were grateful for that.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So I know that you told me there was something that your father taught you that was important throughout your life about commitments.
Yes.
What
It
was
says a
that?
lot about me too, I guess. But I guess when I was a senior in high school, I'd been dating a guy through high school and he went on to college and he wanted to continue the relationship, but I didn't. Anyway, we had a date. And in the meantime, a guy I wanted to date asked me out and I accepted. And so I told my brother to let the ex-boyfriend know not to come pick me up. Well, he didn't do that. And when the boyfriend came to the door, my dad answered the door. And he told him I was supposed to go with him on a date. And I didn't know about any of this. I went on with a guy I wanted to date and went to a ball game. I was a cheerleader, went to a ball game. And the end of the basketball game, I looked over and there were my mom and dad at the door. And I knew exactly what had happened. And so when I got to the door,
They were not there to watch you cheer.
no, it was after the game. They had been square dancing. So anyway, when I got there, Daddy said, go get in the car. And I said, please let me just ride home. Let me, finish the date. And he said, no, we get in the car. So I got in the car and I was grounded for, I think, a month. I don't know how long. But Daddy said to me, he said, I don't care who you date, but if you make a commitment, you keep it. And that's the way we live. And this is a lesson for you to learn. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. So it was did shape, I think, how I approached life in terms of trying anyway to follow his lead on that.
Well, I've known you a long time. And I think that's probably true that you've made commitments and you followed through.
But he was strict, but he was also somehow, I don't remember words because I think those days you didn't hear I love you so much or, just different. But I knew that they loved me and that they would support me in whatever I do. And after I became a lawyer, he was very proud. I don't think he was so proud of when I was a social worker, but anyway.
How interesting. Let's talk about your first career before law school. What was that?
Well, I was a social worker for the state of Tennessee and McMinn and Bradley County. It was worked with abused and neglected children, foster care children.
What made you become a social worker?
Well, I always wanted to be a social worker. I was at Tennessee Wesleyan, which is a small college, Methodist college in Athens, Tennessee. And I was there for 2 years, but they didn't have a degree in sociology and at that time, social work usually was not really a major in most schools. So I transferred to University of Tennessee at Knoxville, lived at home, which was awful after being away for 2 years at Wesleyan. But they had a degree in sociology, so I got that. Went to my first job was back in Athens, where my husband was, and worked with children, as I said, and it really reinforced that that's what I wanted to do, that I wanted to make a difference for kids in foster care, get them in some sort of permanent situation.
Mhm.
So I did that for about 10 years. And during that time, I got my master's degree in social work. Felt like I didn't know enough, which was true. I was 21 years old when I started being a social worker and was going out and removing children for abuse and incest and the hills of East Tennessee. So it was.
I imagine that was dangerous work sometimes too.
Sometimes as I look back, I couldn't believe I was out by myself. You didn't have the police go with you. You just went and approached. And,
yeah.
Back in the hollows of East Tennessee, I remember one where the grandfather, I had to cross a creek, leave my car, cross a creek, go up to this cabin, and the grandfather came out, and the allegation was he had been sexually abusing his granddaughters. So I told him that and told him I was there to pick up the girls. So anyway, there were some other mothers I worked with at that time that I felt like if I knew a little more about behavioral psychology, knew a little more. And so I got my master's degree from UT in Nashville. And I had a commitment to go back to North Carolina where I had been working to pay off the educational commitment. So I did that, and I was a supervisor of a child welfare unit. And
So you continued on with foster care in the foster care area.
right, and we were in New Bern, North Carolina, where there's a military base, and really set up a new program to recruit parents to take older children, adopt older children. And that's what led me to law school.
How so?
Well, we contracted with a law firm, small law firm in New Bern to meet us in court when we removed children from their homes or terminating parental rights. And I did all the work. I wrote the questions for them. They never met the family, the children. They would just come and say, you know, Miss Walker, what about so-and-so? You know, when did you pick up this child, whatever. And I thought, you know, I can do this and I can do it better, I think, because I understand what's going on. So I applied for law school and ended up back in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee. Their legal clinic was something I very much wanted to be involved in, and was. And it was a great experience, a great law school, good professors, a new way of thinking for me. I really had always been sort of an English social work mind, and it was new to do critical thinking and to learn a lot from the Socratic method. And I really look back on those 3 years as a real broadening, I guess, of my experience and of my thinking. I had to work part-time, so I was able to work with Rayford Gray, a professor there who was also interested in juvenile law. So I had lots of opportunities, made wonderful friends. And back to the sports, we had a law women team that played all intramurals, and we were very proud of that. Challenged the faculty to a softball game, and you know, just had a good time.
What was your favorite course or professor?
All my favorite professors, Joe Cook and John Sobieski, took every course they offered, and they were wonderful. Favorite course was constitutional law. I really could see how that
I
would.
don't think there are many people who would say that. That's interesting.
I don't know, you know, the least favorite course was bills and notes. So that tells you something about me. I really was more on the, I don't know, policy philosophy background.
Theoretical.
Right. And the application of the law. And Sobieski was great because of his, he taught evidence. I mean, he taught the practical things that you needed to practice law. So they were really wonderful.
Mhm.
And Marty Black, I mean, there were lots of wonderful professors there, I thought, at that time.
Yeah. So after law school, or was there anything you did during law school, any jobs that you had other than working for Gray during the summer?
Let's see. Oh, yeah, during the summer, one summer I went to school. I was really on a time bind because I was putting myself through law school and had to really get through as fast as I could. But the second summer, after my second year, I got an internship at Legal Services of Middle Tennessee and worked with you and other people to develop a sort of evaluation of domestic abuse in general sessions courts in Tennessee, in Nashville and around Nashville, the counties around. So another intern, Abby Rubenfeld, and I went to general sessions court, sat in, and when there was a domestic violence case, we would interview the mother if she was willing, or the woman after the case had ended, and put together a handbook for mothers, women who were involved with a domestic abuse situation, how to report it, where to go, very practical. And got involved a little with the YWCA at that time in developing a domestic violence shelter.
And my recollection of all that is that you may have had a couple of interesting encounters with some of the general sessions judges who wanted to know why in the world y'all were sitting in on the court and observing them. They thought they were being monitored or something.
You know, there was, you probably remember more about that than I do. What I remember is the, I don't know if disdain is the right word, but there weren't many women in general sessions court. And I may be remembering more when I was practicing at legal services, but you got a lot of little lady, do you have anything to say? Or, I remember making an objection on an evidentiary ruling on hearsay. And General Sessions, the judge said, Miss Walker, everything comes in. If you're there and you hear it, you can say it, And so I dutifully brought out my Don Payne book on evidence and read from it to the judge. I can't believe I did that, but read it and, said that clearly that's not the right ruling. And needless to say, he was not persuaded. The lawyer on the other side got a good laugh out of the whole thing. But the experience with legal services that summer, I was really exposed to a large, wonderful working group of lawyers, completely dedicated to serving the poor, the unrepresented in Middle Tennessee. And Gordon Bonham and Ashley Wiltshire, Russ Overby, longtime legal services lawyers. And it was just so inspiring. I mean, we worked hard as both an intern and then later as a lawyer there, and could do big things. It was a time when federal policy and federal law supported the constitutional rights of the poor, but it hadn't come around to the judges sometimes, or the landlord-tenant law, people who lost their children, no representation after they lost their child, even termination of parental rights. So it really made me know this was the right step for me. It was an opportunity to do something, and legal services in Middle Tennessee at that point. It was just amazing, and the group of people they had. I came on in 1975 was when I was doing internship. No, I'm sorry, 1977. Yes, 77. And they had Jimmy Carter was president, and maybe in 78. But anyway, in that range. And he had authorized the national organization, Legal Services Corporation, a lot of money. And so Ashley was able to hire a bunch of us. I want to say 12 people. And we were in Clarksville and Gallatin and Nashville. Murfreesboro, started a Murfreesboro office. So it was really an exciting time.
Legal Services of Nashville really became legal Services in Middle Tennessee.
Right. And it was very inspiring, rewarding, a great teaching ground.
Now, how long did you work at Legal Services?
I was the intern that year, and then I worked for almost 3 years after that. I left to go to Vanderbilt to teach in the legal clinic at Vanderbilt.
And why did you go to the legal clinic? Was there any
Well,
particular
my partner in crime over many years is Andy Shookoff, and Andy had gone over to Vanderbilt. He was a graduate at Vanderbilt to start to help with the legal clinic, to expand it. Vanderbilt, unlike UT, had not had a very active clinic, had not had one at all for a good number of years. So I was asked by Frank Block, who's the director, to come over and start a mental health clinic where we represented people who were being committed, and in juvenile court to represent the mothers and fathers who were involved in juvenile court. And then later, I was there almost 3 years also. I was asked to teach a negotiation interviewing course in the regular law school curriculum. And I taught that jointly with a professor from the divinity school. So it was a law divinity course that some students sort of petitioned the dean to start, that they needed practical experience. So it was great. We videotaped, we had clients come in, and the regular students, non-clinic students, took that course. And I did that 2 full years right until I left. Very interesting to see the more business directed students, the students who were doing corporate law, who knew they wanted to go into a big firm, signed up. And it was gratifying that they found it very helpful. Let us know that it was important.
A good exposure for the big law people.
Right.
And you said your partner in crime, Andy Shookoff. I think you may have said he was at least one of your mentors, if not your main mentor in your career.
He was, at that time, certainly, and in later years, I guess in the in-between years before I joined him at juvenile court. Mike Cody was the attorney general, and I worked for General Cody and Knox Walkup, and they were also inspiring in their, both were liberal, both were very full of integrity, demanded a lot from their staff, were very supportive, and I was there off and on, back and forth between different jobs for 3 different years, 3 different times.
That was sort of your home away from home.
It was. I'm grateful for that.
Or your mooring place, maybe you would go back to them. So you had a number of jobs. I mean, when we talked, there were like 10 or more jobs that you had or positions you had during your career, which I found amazing that you had done so many different things. But as you said, you kind of would gravitate back to the AG's office in between jobs sometimes.
Well, it was, I don't want to sound like somebody who couldn't hold a job.
No. I don't mean that, because there were some jobs, you had some political jobs.
After I was at the legal clinic, I went to, I realized that I really had never practiced as much sort of formal law. That's not a good word to use, but at legal services and a legal clinic. It was very preliminary, a lot of motion work, a lot of summary judgment. We won a lot with just summary judgment or motion to dismiss, because people were not following federal law. It's a new thing. Consumer law.
It's not that it was easy, and yet it was easy,
Right.
because the law was right there. It's
Right.
like in the consumer area, there was what we call Reg Z, and nobody was following it. So all these cars were being repossessed, and you could get most of them back because nobody followed the law.
And it was a time like the landlord tenant law, which you think, oh, how important is that? Well, people need a place to live that they can afford, and 30-day notice is required before you can evict someone. No one was doing it. I mean, so it was a time when the law was changing, and people had not caught up with the law. So anyway, after being 6 years doing work in poverty law, I wanted to get some more in-court experience. And so there was an opportunity to go to the Attorney General's office, and there were 3 big cases that were set for trial. For some reason, I was doing those cases. One was on a mandatory age retirement case with Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. Love that case. And it was a week-long trial before Judge Higgins. It was the first time I'd done a trial, certainly that complex.
First trial that you had, and it's in federal court in front of Judge Higgins. That's pretty amazing.
And with 6 days, started on Monday and went through Saturday, and we won. And then it was reversed by the Sixth Circuit, but it was a great experience. And so that, and I had a couple of employment cases that were a week or so in being tried. So I got a good exposure, and also represented some of the universities in their more employment, environmental work at the AG's office. And then I had a child, and General Cody thought I should not be flying all over the state doing litigation, so he encouraged me to apply for the general counsel's position at the Tennessee Board of Regents, which the Board of Regents has the 6 universities. It has all the public universities except the University of Tennessee. So I went there, I got that job, and it was very interesting. They were under a desegregation order, the Geyer desegregation order. And my job as general counsel and affirmative action officer for the system was to get the universities to comply.
That must have been a challenging.
That was very, very challenging.
Task.
But the chancellor was Tom Garland, a former senator, and just the most courtly man. He was so supportive of me. I had a young baby, young child. I was divorced mom at that time, so it was challenging to balance everything. But I learned a lot. I worked directly with the presidents of the universities and the student affairs, the deans of student affairs. And one of the things I'm most proud of, we got a sexual harassment policy adopted by the board. And then we did workshops across the state in the community colleges and universities, letting them know what the law was on sexual harassment. And so the workshops were with the faculty who protested mightily that there was no sexual discrimination or sexual harassment going on. The first year after we had the workshops, we had 69 complaints from students, and 68 of those were validated.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's something that I'm proud of, that we were able to accomplish. And again, it was an educational matter. So it was my first taste really of in-house counsel job. And I liked it. I was there for about 4 years. And then a new chancellor was announced, Otis Floyd from Tennessee State University, great man, who I'd worked with when he was president of TSU. But it was just not a great fit. And so I decided to go back to the AG's office and work there back in doing institutional and finance law. I forgot what the name of the section was, but something brand new as well. And I did that for about a year and then had an opportunity to go and be one of the magistrate judges at Juvenile Court in Davidson County. My mentor, Andy Shookoff, had been elected juvenile judge and appoints a number of magistrate judges to hear some of the
So
cases.
what does a magistrate judge in juvenile court do?
Well, at that time, we could do anything the judge could do, but they could, a decision could be appealed to the judge. And I was given my dream job, which was to work with all of the children in foster care, the neglected, abused children.
So you kind of come full circle from being a social worker to now a lawyer who deals with social work issues.
Right. It was. That's why I went to law school. And it was very, I was there 6 years till Andy was defeated as juvenile judge. And the new judge wanted her own people. And so we all were let go. So again, that was, I went back to the Attorney General for another year to work.
It's a good thing you did well at the Attorney General's office, because that was your home away from home. They let you come back every
And
day.
that really was Knoxville who valued what I'd done, I guess. It was
Who's a great lawyer and a nice,
yes.
good person.
Right. So anyway, but the Board of Regents job with higher education was new to me, but it also having the challenge of affirmative action with the desegregation lawsuit was, I don't want to say fun, but I had a lot of influence. The chancellor gave that power to me and would meet with the presidents, and we would go over what their pools were they including minorities in their pools. And that included TSU.
This is when you were with the Board of Regents.
Right. So it was a real education on integration, how to make things work, the resistance to having other race faculty, to getting qualified people. So it was, again, an exciting time. I've loved all of my jobs as a lawyer and a social worker. So that's been something I've been grateful for as I've gotten older, to realize that not everybody gets a chance to have interesting jobs.
Right.
So that was something.
Well, and a lot of people stay in the same job and have burnout.
Well,
And
I think it's one thing I said to younger lawyers, don't stay in a job that you're not fulfilled, or if you can, find something that you really are inspired by, that you enjoy. And for me, it was important to think I could make some changes. So where were we?
Well, you're talking about the duties of, you're talking about the duties of magistrate judges in general session. I keep saying general sessions, I apologize, in juvenile court. And what you did in juvenile court. You talk a little bit about that, and then you went into.
Well, we were, I heard all of the cases from the time the children were removed from the home all the way through when they were either reunited with their parents or rights were terminated for them to be placed for adoption. So it involved, I was lucky to be with Andy. He was very involved in the National Association of Juvenile Judges and the Tennessee Association of Juvenile Judges. And again, it was a time of change, and the juvenile court judges in the past did not have to be lawyers.
Yeah.
And so it would be just people, in the community
Right.
who were designated as juvenile judges, but they didn't have a law degree. Now there were maybe 10 when I was involved in juvenile court. But Andy was
10 that were holdovers left over from the old
Right.
system, yeah.
And Andy was really interested in doing the training. And so he brought a lot of training to much resistance. These are juvenile judges whose mantra was the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so in rural counties, particularly delinquent kids, children charged with delinquency, and even the neglect and abuse kids, there was a predisposition against the child and the parent.
Yeah.
And constitutional rights were not really acknowledged. So we got involved in the national organization. We were a model juvenile court and did some traveling to share what we were doing. I required the department to bring children to court, even babies. I wanted to see them. I wanted to feel a personal responsibility for them, and felt like my background as a social worker was really invaluable to trying to figure out what's wrong with the system, and worked with the Department of Children's Services to try to be sure that all the arms were working, that the department trained their folks, that their lawyers were well trained. Andy and I developed a training program for guardians ad litem, and recruited people out of law school to come to juvenile court. Don't just think it's the big court circuit and court of appeals. Be aware that juvenile court can give you great experience. So we developed that. I helped develop the foster care review boards, which gave citizen input, and they reviewed the cases. We developed CASA here, the Child Advocate Program, where volunteers were assigned to families.
And that's still a program that continues on.
Yes,
That's a
and
big
it's a
deal.
national program. And we didn't start it. 3 women from the Jewish, I've forgotten the exact name, Jewish women, not gonna get the name in my head, but anyway, Ann Eisenstadt and a couple of other people came and wanted us to start it. And so we did, and they were great support. And it's been wonderful for children to have an advocate outside the system to push DCS, to push the court, and to try to make us all do what we're supposed to be doing.
So you also worked at DCS for a while too.
Yes, I was their general counsel
Right.
after Andy was defeated, after juvenile court changed hands, and worked with Commissioner George Hadaway, who was responsible for integrating what had been the juvenile delinquent side, which had been with the Department of Corrections, and there's with a statutory change became part of Department of Children's Services, a new Department of Children's Services, which had some authority in Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Welfare, was all combined into Children's Services. So shortly, maybe a year after that started, Commissioner Hadaway asked me to be the general counsel and to bring on new lawyers in the system. Governor Sundquist had authorized the hiring of, I want to say it was 36 new lawyers for the department. There had been like 16. So social workers, again, like I used to do, were going to court by themselves. So that was a great opportunity, and really enjoyed that work. We were sued during that time by a New York law firm about the deficits in the foster care system. So I was involved in negotiating a settlement on that, which went on for 10, 11 years. Unfortunately was dismissed, and now the department again struggles.
Departments are in a bit of a mess these days. They're in
I've
the
come to the
news.
conclusion, for whatever it's worth, that departments like Children's Services, Corrections, and Mental Health almost have to have a lawsuit to make them do the right thing. That's
Or to make the legislature fund what is the right thing.
and
perhaps.
that's what happened with this settlement on foster children. for the first time, we could raise salaries for social workers, training, reduce the caseload, couldn't be over 20 children per worker, and it had been 80, 90 per worker. So it was, again, I've been really fortunate that there have been opportunities for me to be involved with a lot of committed people. I don't want to sound like I'm doing all this. It's just I was one of the people that was involved. And I guess Department of Children's Services and juvenile court jobs, because they were close together and were so related, really made a difference for me. And then once again, there was a new governor and a new commissioner of Children's Services. And
So it was time for you to move
time
on.
for me to move on.
And did you go back to the AG's office?
No, I decided I'd done that enough, and did contract work for about a year where I traveled some with the Annie Casey Foundation and did some training around drug-related juvenile courts programs.
I mean, you had so much experience. There are all kinds of things you could have done.
Well, it was interesting. I liked it for a year, but I was, I wasn't ever in private practice. I never had to bring in clients. And the contract work or consulting work, which is what I was doing, you have to get out there and I thought I had a child
to do business development.
My daughter was in college and I needed to have a regular income. So I saw an opening for the VP of programs for Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Middle Tennessee. And I thought, well, I was 60 at that point. And I thought, well, I'll go back to social work, see if I can get that job. And I got it. It was in a time of transition as well. I'd been very small. I had just gotten $1 million grant to serve children of incarcerated parents.
You seem to be coming at just the right time to these places.
And then at the wrong time in terms of,
Well,
I don't know. It's been good to have different jobs, different opportunities.
as you said, every job has presented new opportunities and they've all been good experiences. So I don't know how you could ask for anything more.
Yeah, no, I don't think I could either. But different subject areas, so learned a lot about different areas of the law. But I was with Big Brothers Big Sisters for 10 years and then retired 9 years ago.
Wow. It's hard to believe you've been retired 9 years.
Well, it is hard.
Hard for you too. So what was your biggest accomplishment or the thing you're most proud of at Big Brothers and Big Sisters?
Well, because of the federal grant and also a new emphasis, we really increased the number of mentors that were available to match our children with an adult.
I think you said they were increased like tenfold or more.
It's a one-to-one mentoring program, and we asked for a commitment of a year from the adult. And we want a commitment for that child's life, graduation, and got it from a lot of people. But we had about, I want to say 400 matches when I came, and when I left 10 years later, we were around 3,000 children served, children who were matched in either school-based program or a community-based program. And we're able to, again, with the help of the National Big Brothers Big Sisters Association, be involved in a lot of research involving the impact of mentors, how to recruit mentors, how to support families. We concentrated on children who were in the housing developments or who were referred by teachers. So we decided we couldn't have enough adults for all the children. I mean, every child needs a mentor, several mentors. But we decided, we're going to have to focus on those kids who really have a tough time, who have a parent in prison or have a single parent economically disadvantaged household. And so we did that, and we're able to expand the program to Murfreesboro and to Springfield and Ashland City. So I'm proud that we were able to impact more children, because I became convinced when I took the job, I wasn't so sure that one-to-one mentoring really can make that much difference. I'd seen the worst results of children who've been abused and neglected at juvenile court. And I wasn't sure that one adult coming in, especially adult middle income, upper income, coming in and interacting with this child. But I became convinced after a couple of years that the one thing that I saw making a difference, that I would see children, their grades improved. We had a lot of monitoring, which was initiated by the national office. So we had the benefit of national researchers on mentoring. Mentoring is sort of a new field, and it was helpful to know that we could gather information, data that could be analyzed on how should we match at age 6, or is age 8 better? What are the reasons to target a particular population? And then what kind of training did we need to support the adult mentor? Because they're going into a situation that they were not familiar with, most of them. So it was really, again, an interesting time to learn a new area.
Yeah.
And to have, to see Nashville really accept large corporations. We had a lot of sponsors, people who donated their money and their time. And it was, and they have a great program right now. They have a wonderful CEO and staff, and continue to expand and change the program as research indicates.
Mhm. That's pretty amazing. I could see why that was rewarding. What would you say, excuse me, out of all your jobs, what would you say was the most challenging positions you had? Maybe not just one, but what were the most top 3 or whatever?
Challenging. Okay, let's see. Well, the Board of Regents, the desegregation effort was certainly one of the most challenging, to figure out how to get everybody on board,
Right.
To understand and to accept and to implement the hiring of qualified.
Not to mention
staff.
teaching them about it
Right.
too.
So that was a lot of resistance, a lot of political implications. We had some great university presidents that bought in and really made a difference, because I couldn't make it happen. The chancellor,
Right.
we could provide a carrot and a stick, but we had to persuade
Need
them.
some leadership.
Yeah. And then the Department of Children's Services, juvenile court was a little easier because we were in control. We could say, if you haven't gotten this child into sex abuse counseling, you've got 3 days to do it and report. I mean, you had a very authoritative role, I guess, which I liked, which wouldn't surprise people. But, it was, I guess we were more in control. We could set up training. We could do the things that we knew would work.
It's easier to tell people what to do than to ask them what to do stuff.
And the DCS job, where I was hiring and training lawyers across the state, was very challenging. Trying to both supervise and to keep people moving, and to try to change the culture on children staying in foster care. There was just once they were in care, they were forgotten, and so we
It's
set
like
up,
the easy way out, I
Right.
guess, right?
so we set up a lot of checks and balances, trying to be sure that the lawyers and the social workers in each county were working together to achieve permanency wherever that was. And there were a lot of pieces of that puzzle.
And is that still the goal today, that to keep the children, get the children back to their parental home?
Well, it's statutory as well, but it also, there's a national, the Adoption and Safe Family Act, federal law, and also Tennessee law, which sets out exactly what you're supposed to do. That if the child cannot return home in 15 months, you've provided resources. That's an important part. Then you're supposed to move to terminate parental rights and find an adoption or a relative. And relative care has become more of a focus, because it is a logical thing that a child can be with family. And there have been some federal funds appropriated, some state funds, to help both foster parents and kinship care for a child to be with their family. So there's been progress. I think it's just it's one of those situations you can't relax. You can't
It's never
stop. You've got to
Right.
keep pushing on that, and you've got to have a juvenile judge and in every county, pushing and
Right.
knowing that a child's growing up, a year in a child's life is a huge amount of time.
Right.
And we had children who hadn't seen their parents in 3 years, who didn't have a plan, who'd moved from foster home to foster home, and that still is happening. So it's one of those things that I find troubling still, that, and I've really struggled with that in retirement, that, I wish I could do more now. It's sort of a hard thing to accept. You don't want to accept that
Yeah.
the system has to be so broken, because it doesn't.
Right. Right. So are there, let's talk about cases, because you've done cases over the years. Are there any memorable cases? I think we talked about a couple.
Memorable. Well, I guess the AG office, I represented the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. And one of my funny cases was involving a deer called Pancake. And my job was to represent the wildlife officer who had removed Pancake from his home in Winchester. The officer found Pancake, who had been a pet of this family for several years, lived in their backyard, was very content. The family was content. This young wildlife officer knew it was against the law for them to have a deer.
And this deer wasn't like pinned in.
Well, there was a confinement.
Oh.
But it was a big area. The deer was happy. But anyway, so the officer issued a ticket, a citation. The family brought it to court. And so I was, as the agency lawyer, sent to Winchester, Tennessee, where one of the times where I kept being called little lady by the chancellor. But to defend the state's position that Pancake had to be let loose into the wild, even though Pancake probably would have a hard time surviving in the wild. So, I went down and did my job and defended, and the chancellor ordered the deer to be removed. And the next day in the Tennessean, the headline front page was "State Removes Pancake from Loving Family." So that was interesting. Thank goodness we were able to work.
I guess, did Kirk Loggins write that article? Did Kirk Loggins write that?
Yes, of course.
Yes, I had a Kirk Loggins article too.
He always found great things.
Mine had to do with chemical castration of my client, so.
Great things to write about.
Yeah.
And I guess what's the while it also defended or worked on Reelfoot Lake situation in West Tennessee that was very political about lowering the lake and the environmental impact. And there was a pretty amount of publicity. And the other one involved raccoons. All of my sort of funny cases were at the AG's office. But
you also told me about a limited guardianship that you worked on.
Yes, and that was at Legal Services. I was a brand new lawyer. I don't think I had a license yet, because you can work at Legal Services without
Under the supervision.
supervision. And I had a new.
Let's clarify that. You had taken the bar, but you were waiting for the results.
Well, no, I think I was still, maybe I'd taken the bar. You could work as a third-year law student or a graduate law student.
Right. You may have been studying for the bar.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was at Legal Services, and a woman came in who was the sister of a woman who had been abused and beaten terribly by her husband and was in a coma. And the current situation was that the husband still was the person making decisions. He was the legal, had the legal responsibility for this woman who was in a coma.
Even though he had beaten her and put her in a coma. And
he had not been charged, and it was hard to prove because the wife was in a coma. So there was a new statute called the limited guardianship law that allowed a relative, a friend, a person who could show they should be the responsible party to be designated as that. It was a court action in circuit court. So, as I said, the law was new, and I could read it as well as anybody and see what we had to do. So we filed an action on behalf of the sister. The important part I left out is the husband was found while the wife was in the hospital, forcing her sleeping, I've forgotten the name of the
Second all?
drug, Seconal,
Can you tell me?
a whole bottle into her mouth, and they were in time to get her to get it out.
And he wasn't prosecuted for that either.
Didn't prosecute that either. So that was the main reason the sister knew he couldn't be, that he would try to kill her, because if she came to, she would tell what he had done. He'd thrown a TV at her, he'd slung her into the walls of the trailer. I mean, he had really beaten her into a coma. So we went to court, and it was my first time certainly in being in a little trial, and the lawyer on the other side represented the husband. And I was, I was supervised in the sense that someone knew what I was doing and had given me help. But I was doing the direct and the cross, and had Gordon Bonham, a wonderful lawyer, slip in at some point to see how I was doing, and he gave his advice. I was getting ready to do my really stellar cross-examination.
You prepared hours probably for
It
this,
was
right?
long hours of the husband. And I just, prepared and was ready, never done a cross-examination. And so Gordon's sitting beside me. And so as he's doing the direct, his lawyer's doing the direct, I'm writing down what I'm going to ask him. Gordon writes no, no, no. And basically we did no cross-examination with Gordon's guidance, which was very good guidance because we didn't need it. And the sister was appointed the guardian, and the woman, as far as I know, never recovered.
Sometimes it's best not to ask
Not
questions.
to.
Right.
And as a
And the
young,
best thing to know as a lawyer is when not to say anything.
ask a question, and I didn't know that yet.
That and don't ask a question you don't know the answer to.
And you always think, oh, I can get them on that. I can get them on that. And it was my first experience, and a good one. And I had a great guidance from him, from Gordon.
Yes. And I think you mentioned another one about a child custody case that you lost.
Yes, that was a case that was in juvenile court, and the young mother, I don't know, 17, 18, had lost her child, and the grandmother had taken custody. It was more of a neglect case. The mother was a teenager and was acting like a teenager, and the grandmother moved very quickly to get custody. And so we were representing the mother in juvenile court because she had, quote, reformed, that she had a job, was able to take care of her child. But she had been, she'd ridden cross country with truck drivers. I mean, she didn't have a great background, but we were able to show to the juvenile court that she had settled down and was able to take care of her child, and she was given custody. Grandmother appealed to the circuit court, and Judge Muriel Robinson was brand new on the bench, and I was facing a very determined lawyer representing the grandmother. And it was a really tough case, and we lost. Judge Robinson returned the child to her mother. I'm sorry, her grandmother. But there was a guardian ad litem that was appointed to represent the child, and his testimony was really key to the judge returning the child. And it was very much full of hearsay, which of course I objected to. But at that point, that was the role that the judges expected the guardians ad litem to take, to tell them what they needed to know, even though the person who had told them was not present in court. It was full of hearsay. So after we lost, I was at the Vanderbilt Legal Clinic. At that point, I was at legal services and then transitioned, and so took the case with me. And we filed an appeal to the Court of Appeals, and lost in terms of custody was upheld with the grandmother, but the court made a decision about the role of a guardian ad litem and laid out that hearsay was not allowed, just as in any other witness, and that the guardian ad litem could not take that role. And it's been a case that's been relied on in terms of
established some law,
some good law,
despite the personal loss.
And it was a real killer. It was the first time I was very worried I hadn't done as good a job, that this lawyer on the other side was very experienced, and just went over everything I had done and whether I'd done it right. And again, it was it's hard to have it's good to have high expectations of yourself, but you have to learn what you can control and what you can't control.
That's very important. That's excellent advice for anybody who might watch this. It's excellent advice. That and don't ask questions all the time.
Right.
Don't ask every question you think of. So you talked a little bit about the challenges of being a parent, and in your case, you were a single parent, although your daughter's father is around, but you had custody of her. Well, tell us what some of the interesting challenges you faced with raising a child and working in all these important positions that you had in your career.
Well, let me say first, my daughter's father and I had joint custody, so he was very involved and was a good father. But she lived I was a primary custodian. But we very much shared responsibility. But if he also was, at the time she was younger, was a judge, and so we both would have cases scheduled on the docket, both of our dockets that we had to meet. And when she was sick, that was usually my responsibility to figure out what to do with her. And my family was not in Nashville. And so I had to depend a lot on friends and other people when I couldn't take her to daycare. And it's finally got, so when she was sick, and I was at juvenile court during her younger days, is that I would bring her and her blanket and her sleeping bag, and she would often be under the bench where I was holding court because she was sick and a fever, and she'd just be down there. And she was a great kid. She didn't talk out. She knew I was holding court. And ever so often she could crawl to the door that led to the hallway that led to my office and not be seen by the folks in the courtroom. So, the regulars knew when Elizabeth was under the bench.
Right.
And then
you were on the bench and she was under the bench.
Right. And so that was interesting to deal with illness and how to be flexible on that.
You learn to be creative when
And I
children.
I wanted to be, as all parents want to be, there for her for what she needed. So I wanted to coach her basketball team, be a Girl Scout leader, and so be involved with the school. She went to public school, so it was great to be involved with helping be sure she's getting a good education.
Right.
So we had a lot of fun, and she was. It was something to handle, but I was an older mom. I had her when I was 41, so it was such a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
That I never minded doing less than I had done before in the community. And as she got older, that balanced out. I was
gonna say, it doesn't sound like you did less. You just sounds like you did more and took care of her and doing things in the community.
Well, you have to decide. I think in those days, particularly, we just all, if we had children, we had a career, regardless of whether we were married or divorced or whatever, you figured out how to do it. And it was
it's almost like you're trying to prove that you in fact could do
everything.
All these things, right?
And I don't know that that's not still the case but particularly then when we started a Lawyers Association for Women. We had the YMCA make a dressing room available for women. There were lots of things that needed to be done to accommodate women,
right?
Professional women.
Things have changed a lot since
yes. And so
in the time that we both started practicing law.
And that was good. I found, and it depends on the child, it depends on your circumstance, but I think you can, you just have to look at it. Everybody's different, issues of how involved you are. And so it was very gratifying to be able to have a daughter, and I have two stepsons that we're involved with as well. And it's just a full life that you can manage.
Yeah, it's despite the challenge. So let's talk about what you've done since retirement. You've been retired, what'd you say, 10 years?
9 years.
9
I
years.
retired when I was 70. That shows how old I am, but was able to keep involved with Renewal House, which is a residential program for children and mothers.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. You've not just been involved with it in retirement. Talk about the beginnings of Renewal House, because you were instrumental in starting Renewal House.
I was, along with several other people, many other people actually, but it's
But you were there and part of the beginning that got it going.
Yeah,
So
I was
take some credit for it.
I was on the bench and hearing a lot of removal, neglect, abuse, but primarily neglect, because moms were committed to crack cocaine. Crack cocaine had just hit Nashville about the time I was hearing.
It was an epidemic in
really,
those days.
And Mayor Bredesen at the time formed a crack cocaine commission. I was involved with that, and trying to figure out what can we do. There were so little resources, and crack cocaine took such a different, had such a different impact on women. And I was seeing a lot of women in their 30s, children were in elementary school and middle school, who had taken good care of their children. They were poor usually. Unfortunately, we still have I don't know, our economically disadvantaged families come into court more than middle and upper income, just because they're not as visible.
Right.
But I had a lot of moms who were coming from the housing developments who were addicted to crack cocaine. On the first hit, it's a terribly addictive drug. And so their crack houses came up and children were being dragged to crack houses. And so I had this real influx and didn't have much to offer to the moms. Insurance, if they had insurance, was 10 days. There were no treatment programs for crack cocaine. Most of the federal and state money was designated to treat alcoholism for men, which is, that was good, but we couldn't do it. So anyway, I gathered together some data, tried to keep some information on how many I was seeing. I have seen about 85% of the neglect cases involve crack cocaine.
85%.
So it was, it was a very serious problem.
Mhm.
And the children, unless the moms got treatment, were going to grow up in foster care at that time, or we'd move toward adoption. And so, just gathered together several, Debbie Taylor Tate, Art Rebeck, Frank Andrews, to get together, and the Junior League, through Debbie's influence, gave $50,000 to get us started. We named our Endeavor Renewal House, and it was a place where moms could take their children with them, where they got treatment.
It's get them out of the situation, their current living situation,
Right.
where they were surrounded by crack cocaine,
Right.
and put them in a different
Right.
situation.
And instead of being in foster care. And so we were able to get state money to follow the mother to Renewal House. So I had kind of a interesting funding set up. So we received a lot of state money for the moms that they would have been getting had they been living on their own. We got a lot of community involvement. And so we were able to start Renewal House at two apartment complexes that had bankrupted and were nice brick apartments in North Nashville. And we opened that 27 years ago. It's still going strong. And I'm very proud of it. Just recently have it doubled the amount of women who can be served. New building, a new really wonderful building right beside the other. And then the older buildings we've transformed into affordable housing for women who have been through a treatment program. So,
That's remarkable.
It really is a wonderful program. I have to give credit to Pamela Sessions, who's the executive director, and has made a lot of this happen.
And did you say something about a new child care center?
Yes, we have gotten a good reputation, and the Department of Education wanted to fund, gave $1 million for us to raise some more money, but to fund and build a new child development center on the property. And it's ready to open, I think, in July, in a partnership with St. Mary's Philip, who will be running the daycare center. And it'll be open to the community as well as the Renewal House children. So, and since
And how many children?
Well, it depends. 75 children will be served by the new facility. So
That's
it's
great.
significant
Yeah.
number, and maybe Renewal House may be a third, so there'd be maybe 2/3 roughly available in the community. So that's exciting, and I've been involved since I retired also in that. And then another organization, A Step Ahead, which provides free, long-lasting, reversible contraception, basically IUDs, for anybody, regardless of income. And we pay for transportation for them to come to the clinic, and we use existing clinics. We didn't duplicate. We just worked with several Nashville clinics to provide that service. And that's been very interesting. And
where did the money come from for that?
Well, a lot of just individual fundraising for the first 3 or 4 years. This last couple of years, we've had a large grant from the Department of Human Services for their clients who receive Families First, who are involved. It was training or school or anything that they are receiving from the Department of Human Food Stamps. SNAP now, I show my age. And so that has allowed us to expand to the surrounding counties. So we do education in schools, well, in communities, can't go into the schools, but provide a lot of information. And since the Roe versus Wade decision, we have been, was overturned. We have had a lot more interest in the education part of the program. So I was on the board and helped get that started, and now I'm off the board, but still trying to be supportive and work with my church, Belmont Methodist, on some other immigrant-related issues. So it's been fun. It's been to have time to do something different. And I'm gardening, and
I think you say pretty busy.
I think I do.
So, Mary, I think we've covered most of the things I had intended to cover. Is there something that you can think of that you think is important to go down in history that I haven't covered?
I don't think there's anything important to go down in history. I will say that
you want to be remembered.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, but over the last, 20 years, a couple of times I've talked to groups about what you can do sort of with your life, with your law degree. And this started, I guess, way back when, realizing that the education that you get in law school is really unique. And having endured the Socratic method, as well as developing your critical thinking and just the status that lawyers enjoy, whether deserved or not, is that we can have a real influence in the community. So I guess I'd like to urge young lawyers, if anyone happens to be watching this, which I can't imagine, but
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
But to not sell yourself short, look around for something you're interested in. Doesn't have to be children. It doesn't have to be anything that is earth-shaking. Look around and see how you can use your unique skills to make a change, and
to add to the community.
If your job is, maybe more, I don't know, office bound, or, you're not as exposed to what's going on in the community, I guess I urge you not to accept that. Learn what's happening in areas that you're interested in and volunteer, because you will have more influence than someone who is not a lawyer. It's especially in today's world, I think lawyers are critical to making any change that we're going to make. And I just think sometimes we don't recognize and don't give up some of our time to be involved in meeting the community's needs.
Yeah.
So I think it's the part of my career that's been rewarding has been when I've been involved with the community, not accepting things as they are and just saying, well, you can't do anything about that, or the system's broken. Well, anything that's broken can be fixed. So I urge people to look at that and do that, find a way to contribute.
That's, I think, a perfect way to end.
Thank you for this interview.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's fun to catch up and been a pleasure to interview you. And I hope people enjoy watching this because it's been fun for me to work on it.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.